Welcome back to the O Hockey Show. Now today we are talking about I don't know what the right way to word it. I would say cup potential / like playoff status, I guess, whatever you want to call it. We're going to look at every team. I've ranked them throughout each division, kind of like the tier ratings, S, A, B, whatever. It's kind of the same thing, but I have my own categories. So let's jump into it with the bottom feeders. So let's start off there with not going to happen. They're not going to win the cup. They're just not there, right? Now, well, let's say playoff. They're not going to make it playoff status. Stanley Cup, well, that's a whole other story. So let's just say playoff status. Not going to happen. So let's start off with LA. LA sucks. Deal with it. Moving on to the Islanders. Now, the Islanders are a team that they have a good team. I'm not saying the Islanders are a bad team, but the thing is that last year they didn't make the playoffs, and this is the type of team that is perfectly built for the playoffs. The Islanders are a team like the Blue Jackets, I would say, that are built for playoff hockey. It's just their problem is that they need to get there first. And the Islanders last year didn't make it, and they didn't make any adjustments this offseason to try to bounce back from that. And I think the Islanders are a team that are desperate to do something like that. And I feel like the moves that the Seattle Kraken made, bringing guys like Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky, that's what they need to do. Bring in some offense. Bring in some invigorators to the lineup. But instead, they've done absolutely nothing. And they have talent like Matt Barzal and Brock Nelson. They have these guys that can actually do something, but the whole team as a whole, they're built for defense, and they're good at it. They're great at it. Sorokin's amazing. Their defense is great, but that's for playoff hockey. During the regular season, you got to win games. You can't grind out games in the season. Sure, you can win a couple like that, but it's not going to work out overall. So the Islanders, the problem is with them is that they didn't do anything to fix last year's mistakes. And last year it wasn't like, it was a fluke. Like, they didn't do terrible, but they didn't do enough. They didn't win to get in. They didn't get in. And that's kind of the problem. That's it right there. There it is. So the Islanders haven't tried. They didn't learn from their mistakes last season, and that's why they're going to not make it. So moving on to the Philadelphia Flyers. The only real move they did was bring in Tony DeAngelo and John Tortorella. Now, Torts, I think, is the perfect coach for Philadelphia. I don't know. This is where he should have been all along, and I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Philly would hugely benefit from, Torts on there. A guy that gets the most out of his team to grind and grit it out. I know I just said that about the Islanders won't do it, but it's a different way. Tortorella will only accept greatness from his team, and if the Flyers are a team that go back to the Broad Street Bullies, I wouldn't be surprised that's what they bring back. They even brought in Tony DeAngelo to talk about a guy that's a bully. So that is exactly what Philly needs. And I know I have him down here in the bottom feeders, but I would not be. I wanted to kind of put him in wild card territory, but they just don't have enough from the team as a whole that convinces me they can do it. However, I think this is the type of team that I wouldn't be surprised makes it to the playoffs, but they're not going to win. So I would say it's just not going to happen. They could, if they make it to the first round, it's not going to happen if they get in anyway. So regardless, Philly, bottom. Now we move on to the Coyotes. Now the Coyotes are a team that aren't trying to win. Neither, it's just that simple as that. They're not trying to win yet. They're bringing in guys. And that's why I kind of put them and Chicago down there. And I put Chicago in the blue because I don't care if you can read their name because they're doing absolutely terrible. And they're purposely, at least the Coyotes are trying to do something. Chicago's just a whole other territory. But they're bringing guys like Connor Geeky, like Logan Cooley. You got guys like Gunther coming up. So it's Soderstrom. They're getting those young talent and working their way up. So the Coyotes in Chicago, they're not even trying. So they're eliminated from conversation. So let's move on to probably not, but who knows. So let's start off with Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh, I've always had them. Over the last few years, I've always been saying, I'm one of the people saying that this is going to be the year they're going to fall off. But it just doesn't happen, right? But I think this is finally the year. They decided to move on from guys like John Marino, these young defensemen. Now, sure, Marino's not an amazing defenseman. He won't be a top guy one day. But he's still a young guy that a team needs to have around on a team, a solid guy. But They part ways with him. They decide to keep around guys like Letang, who had their best season when they're this old already into their career. Guys like Sidney Crosby, sure, 84 points in like 69 games or something isn't bad at all. But like clearly Crosby's starting to fall. Malkin is injured from last season. Is going to be rusty coming into when he's a physical guy that can only last for so long. And they're deciding to keep guys like Rickard Rakell and Kapanen, like guys that aren't really going to win you games, I guess, if you want to call it like that. So for me, Pittsburgh is just, if they even made it to the playoffs, they're going to lose in the first round like they have been. So for me, it doesn't matter if Pittsburgh somehow winds up into a playoff spot. I think they're going to be just outside. Maybe they're like the 17th team in the league. So let's go to the Stars, the first team we have that, actually, no, that's LA, whatever. But the Stars made it to the playoffs last year, but with this whole Jason Robertson stuff going on, I can't help but think things can't be good there. And the Stars, I mean, regardless, even if they are able to keep around Jason Robertson, they're going to have to move someone out to make cap space. And sure, if they can move out a guy like Jamie Benn, then that could be for the best, and they can bring in a different guy and then try to do something like that. But regardless of any of that, the Stars, with their Robertson situation, I mean, that's not good. They have to move on, and then they have to replace someone. Just the combination of things, the Stars are just kind of falling out for me. So the Stars are not, it's just not going to happen with what they got. Vancouver. Vancouver is a team that I can see moving up on this list, but just their moves and their players. Vancouver is one of those teams that have like a good core, but it's just not anything special. It's kind of like the deal with Calgary that I've always said about them. Like, sure, Gaudreau, Tkachuk, and Lindholm are great, and they can get points, and they're great, but they're not a team that's going to win you a Stanley Cup. And I feel like the same thing for Vancouver. Guys like Brock Besser and Bo Horvat and Pettersson, like these guys aren't going to win you a Stanley Cup. And I think they just need, I don't think they need to blow everything up, but I think they need to move on from guys like, instead of Besser, move out Besser and bring in like a guy like, I don't even know, they should have, like maybe like a Tkachuk, bring in like Matthew Tkachuk for Besser or something like that grittiness to the team to stick out through the playoffs. So Vancouver, it's like and then the Sharks, the only reason that I have them higher than bottom is because their preseason right now, they're like crushing it. So I mean, the Sharks have, to me, I mean, I love the Sharks for one, so I'm already biased, but they're just like the preseason, like they still have their players that they were going on runs with. I mean, except Burns now, but like it's not like the team's completely gone. They still got Couture and Meyer and LeBanc and Hurdle, like and Carlson back there. Like who knows? Like any of those guys could find. Like Meyer's always been good. Couture has always been somewhat solid. Hurdle's always okay. Like if they bring in guys like Kunin and Nudavara, like they're just bringing in some guys and guys like William Eklund coming up. Ryan Merkley in the back. Like, they have some decent talent that could come up and make a difference. And who knows? I mean, we always have teams that jump out of nowhere. So, who knows? Sharks, why not? And Buffalo, I have at the bottom of this category because they're just not there. They're just not there. Tage Thompson is a great guy. Great player in Tage Thompson. You need to pay more attention to him. But just as an overall team, it's just not going to happen. So, Buffalo, whatever. Moving on to the wild card. Now, these are the teams that could make it in, and if they made it in, who knows? If these are the teams that make it into the playoffs, they could really do some damage. And these are teams that could, unlike the Islanders, who could do some damage if they made it to the playoffs, but it's hard for them to get there. These are teams that I think can make it. So let's start off with the Ducks. The Ducks are a team, they made a lot of good moves this offseason, bringing guys like Vetrano, Strome, Klingberg. I like what they're doing. But if they made it in, guys like the question is, can guys like Zegras right now do great in the playoffs? Can guys like, one thing I think would be great is Mason McTavish. During that juniors, like that guy's fight in him. What could he do in the playoffs? That's exactly who you want. The Ducks are priming themselves to be a playoff team in the upcoming years. And what if it happens? If the Ducks can make their way in, I could see them doing some damage to a team. They're just overall well. They're top. They kind of fall off towards the bottom of each, like offense and defense, but their top guys can be top guys. So for the Ducks, I feel like if they got in, they would do some damage, maybe get to the second round. So I like the Ducks' chances. The Red Wings, I keep saying it. They're the winners of this offseason. Kubalik, Perron, Kopp. Now they got guys like Evanson coming in. They got Soderblom, was that the guy that they keep talking about from the training camp who's like 6'7" or something? Like, they got some great guys coming in, not to mention guys like us already, Sider, Evanson, Zadina. Like, they got some amazing young guys coming up along with the guys they just brought in during free agency. So, the Red Wings, Ville was great for the Blues last season. So, the Red Wings have a lot going good for them right now. If they can make it to the playoffs, I think they could make it at least past the first round. Now the Devils. The Devils are a team that should be doing amazing. They got so much talent, and it only seems to be adding more. Like, last year, they didn't even have guys like Alexander Holtz, and now they're bringing in guys like, what's his name? The guy they drafted, Nemec or something, if he can make the squad. Like, they just keep bringing in guys. They have Dougie Hamilton now. They have Blackwood in the back, who's a great goalie. Like, they have all of this potential. They have all of these young guys that should be doing great, but they're just not pulling it off. And I think at some point, if they can finally make it snap, I think they could go. And we move on to the Kraken. Now, the Kraken, I like what they did this season, and especially in the Pacific Division, I think they could fight their way to a playoff spot. Now, I don't think they're really a team. I think maybe just like the momentum of them being an inaugural team, well, not inaugural, but a brand new team, and fighting their first playoff run would get them through the first round, or at least a fight in the first round. I don't think they'd get swept. So I think the Kraken, I guess depending on how certain guys fit, like Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky and Matty Beniers, and maybe Shane Wright. But I just think overall, I don't think that they wouldn't really go on a big run, but I think they would have a solid push in the playoffs. And now with the Jets, just a team that, once again, it's another team that, like last year, they missed the playoffs, and they didn't do anything to fix it. And in fact, like guys like Dubois, like it's like hard, like there's drama there, and think guys like Scheifele don't seem to be like the best, and Blake Wheeler stripped of the captaincy. So just like they didn't really fix anything from last season by bringing in any talent, but they also like seem to have more drama on the team now. So it's just an interesting. I don't think the Jets are gonna make it in. So now we move on to the teams that are going to make the playoffs. So at the top, coming in at that, is the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that I kind of wanted to put in finalist. But they just keep proving that they're not that team. Every year, they just lose in the first round. And I know that's a joke, but some teams, like some cores, just don't have it. And I think they downgraded from last year in net especially. And I don't think their defense is getting any real help. So for me, Toronto is just like they are who they are. They're gonna get the same thing, and I think they're just gonna still be stuck getting into the playoffs. Maybe they'll win one round, but they're just not ready to compete. Maybe that one round victory could get them going, but they just can't. They haven't proved it. Every year it's a loss to Columbus, to Montreal, now Tampa Bay, and their biggest fight was finally against Tampa Bay last year, against I would say their best team has ever been. And they lose, and now they downgraded from last year. So for me, Toronto just can't be a finalist. Now the Blues, I think the Blues are great. I think they're amazing. I think the Blues are a team, was one of the few teams that could actually beat the Avalanche last year, but they couldn't get it off. And I feel like for them, they didn't do anything to fix their problems, but at the same time, they solidify guys like Kyrou and that are going to keep going. So for me, the Blues they're still solid. They're still solid, and I think if they could overcome that odd, they had the team to do it, they just couldn't pull it off. So the Blues are playoffs, but The Bruins, once again, like, they bring in guys like Krejci, and they keep around Bergeron, like, they still are in playoff contention. And I wouldn't put them in finalists, but like third place in playoffs is solid. I think that's that's like the perfect place for them. And now we got Calgary. Calgary finally shifted it. Like I said, like 5 minutes ago, I don't think their core of Lindholm, Goudreau, and Kachuk was really going to get the job done. They're not that type. That core has proven that it's just not going to work. They finally shift everything out, and not by choice. but they bring in Huberdeau, they bring in Kadri, which I don't really think is going to do all that well. I think Huberdeau will, and bringing in Mackenzie Weegar to help that defense. I think Kadri's overrated by a landslide. So Calgary is still a playoff team, especially in the Pacific Division, but I don't think they're going to really do that much harm with their new roster either. So we got the Capitals. Now the Capitals to me they did amazing this offseason. I would say they were a pretty solid runner-up in the offseason. Bringing Dylan Strome, bringing in Darcy Kemper, like just these moves, Connor Brown, I think it was Connor Brown. It's just all of these moves were like the perfect thing the Capitals need, and I would not be surprised if they make it to the conference finals. I would say this would be the last year for the Capitals' huge run. I think they can do it, and I think they've done everything perfectly. I mean, that superstar solid goaltending in net. Now they've got a great offense without Ovechkin even on it, if you wanted to say. And defense was already great with John Carlson back there. So the Capitals are like the perfect team. I would say they're like the perfectly like generic team, if you want to say. I guess that's kind of stupid sounding, but like I feel they got like everything is like perfectly like placed to be a good team. So the Capitals, I really like what they're doing. The Predators, I think, are going to finally go on a run next year. I mean, guys like Tomasino, Eeli Tolvanen, Forsberg, Duchesne, Granlund, they got so much guys. Now they're bringing guys like McDonough for defense, which their defense was already great. And Saros is great back there. And then I bring in Kevin Lankinen if he needs relief. So the Predators have done everything perfectly to put themselves. They were good last year, and I think they're just going to propel themselves even farther. So I like the Predators, what they've done. The Wild take a step back behind the Predators because I feel their moves losing Fiala especially, and who was the other one? And Cam Talbot, which I guess they didn't need, but there was one more, wasn't there? Whatever. I feel like the Wild, they're great, they're still good, but losing Fiala is going to be a big pain to that team. So I think they just take a step back because of that. And then we got the Knights, the Golden Knights. Our playoff team. I think last year they just were burdened by injury by like their top forwards. What are you going to do about that? So for me, the Knights they're going to make it to the playoffs, especially in that Pacific Division. And I don't really, the Knights seem to be the playoff team. Like they are, regardless of anything, they're going to do strong in the playoffs regardless. They're going to be a contender. So playoffs, yes. And now the Blue Jackets, I think now, like the Islanders, perfectly built for the playoffs, but they needed that something to spice up that team. They needed something to bring in and really enforce their team, and they did that exactly what they needed in Gaudreau. Exactly what they needed to bolster that offense on an already more like defensive team, like solidly built, like perfect move for them. So Columbus makes it to the playoffs, I'm going to bet. Now the finalists. Who are the teams that are going to for sure make it to the conference finals and the finals? Who is it? Let's start off with the current reigning champs, the Avalanche. Now, the Avs, of course, amazing team. We know this. We know the Avalanche are great. But for me, they lose Kadri, which is a big burden to them. I don't think another team picking up Kadri is great, but I think the Avalanche losing him is terrible. And I think, especially for their guys that they decided to keep around, like Lehkonen, like Valeri Nichushkin, like I like Manson, so it's whatever with him. But they are betting on these young guys that haven't really proven themselves, and they're going to have to they re-sign, they keep around at McKinnon, but they still got Bowen Byram, Newhook. They decided to keep around these, like, Valeri Nichushkin's almost 30 now, or he is 30. Like, he is up there in age, and they just signed him for long term. Lehkonen's young, and he can grow, and I feel like out of the two, Lehkonen will probably be the one that doesn't fall off. But Valeri Nichushkin showed in Dallas that he's got nothing going for him, and he shows up in Colorado, and of course he does good, but he doesn't do amazing. He only had 50 points, right? Like, it's not that stellar, and they pay him $5 million for 8 years or something like that. So I think it's a stupid move. So Avalanche, to be perfectly honest, I kind of wanted to move back. But to me, they have the most potential to be the number one and also, like, lose in the second round. So I'm going to put them there. So why not? So now we got Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay, The problem with them, and I kind of wanted to put them lower, is usually they're the best at keeping the team so good, especially that bottom six. That bottom six is what always rotates in and out, and they always do so good at replenishing themselves. But over these last 2 years, I think the reason they lost to the Avs is that this was probably the weakest team to go into it so far. I mean, previous years they had Goudreau, Joseph, they had Yanni Gord. Like, they had so many better guys in the back end, but I think this year, like, the guys like Patrick Maroon, Corey Perry, like, they weren't up to standard with what they had in previous years, and they haven't really done anything to, I mean, Nick Paul was great. Nick Paul was a great addition, but I don't think what they've added, they didn't really do much this offseason, and I think last offseason they didn't bring in anyone to really replenish that team, and I think that's why they lost. So Tampa Bay is like, for me. Carolina is a team that is so going to do good. I mean, last year they got screwed because their Anderson got injured, and I think so did Antti Raanta for a game or something like that. But then also, they bring in Brent Burns. Now, you can say whatever you want about Brent Burns, but for me personally, it's not just because I'm this fan, but Brent Burns had 54 points on the Sharks, a team that had terrible time producing offense. So what can Brent Burns do on a team like Carolina? I wanted to say California or Calgary. So in Carolina, what can he do? Brent Burns is going to have a huge comeback with the Carolina Hurricanes, not a doubt in my mind. Now the Rangers. Now the Rangers aren't... I hate the Rangers, I'll be honest. But I can tell you that the Rangers are going to do good, and they're just such a well-built team. Bringing guys like Vincent Trocheck, and they got Capo Caco and Lafreniere that are still growing. This team is primed to be, I mean, Shesterkin too. I mean, can't forget him. Adam Fox. They got so much going for them. They got young guys coming up. They had the solidified guys like Kreider, Zibanejad, and Panarin already there. Like, they have... all around, it's just they have the perfect setup to be a dynasty. The question is, can they pull it off? We'll have to see. Last year was their first year really having a run at it, and they did pretty good, so I think they can still keep going. The Oilers, I think this is finally the Oilers last year were finally kicked into gear with McDavid and Draisaitl, and I think this year coming in, finally, now, I kind of wanted to put them lower, but bringing in Campbell was the perfect thing for them. They needed a good goalie. Campbell, to me, I feel like he's a little overrated by people, but I think showing in the playoffs with the Toronto Maple Leafs, like, when he's got something to fight for in front of him, I think he can do solid. The problem is with the Oilers still is their defense. I mean, guys like Darnell Nurse. I mean, Barry's good, but, like, their defense just isn't, it's just not good enough in my mind. I think they need something back there. So for defense, it's like, And then we got Florida, the team that really people can say lost in that trade, but at the same time, I think Chuck is the perfect thing for them. I think Florida's going to be solid regardless. But this is all I have to say. This is my rankings. I know it's probably hard to read, but this is what I have to say about the teams. Now, for the champs, who do I think wins it? I think the teams that win it, I think the conference finals out of these teams, I don't know. It's really hard for me to say. I honestly have no idea. I would not be surprised if a team like the Capitals make a run for it. I wouldn't be surprised. I really think that it's like their year and Ovechkin's final year to really like go for it. So I think that you know what? Screw it. I'll say the Capitals win, even though I don't really believe that. But I'm going to make a prediction there. So thank you for watching this. If you like this, please pick up your free subscription by hitting that red subscribe button. If you like this video, leave a like, not a dislike, but go down below to the comment section. Tell me how stupid I am for everything I've said today. But until next time, I have been your interestingly dressed host, Owen. Too sweet. Have an amazing day, and ta-ta for now.